I was born in San Antonio, Texas, in the Santa Rosa Hospital in 1936, August 29th. So I'm 87 years old, or young if you like, and not getting much younger every day. Most of the history of my family was the Dawsons and the Harveys. The story is about my grandfather that, my great-grandfather that is, was a Harris. Somewhere in Arkansas, supposedly, he got caught stealing a calf. And the Texas Rangers had arrested him. And they were on both, one ranger was on one side of him, another ranger was on, they were on horseback, obviously back then. And they came to this river or creek, I don't know which, and they had to stop to water their horses. Well, my grandfather kicked both of them off their horse, and he got away. And he came all the way down to Devine, Texas. Changed his name from Harris to Dawson. And he never was apprehended down there. So that's supposedly how the Dawson name got started. My dad's mother was Lucy Dawson. And she married a man called Ray Harvey, which was my father, my grandfather. He was a Baptist preacher, poor and cooter brown. This was during the Depression time, so you can imagine they didn't have a bucket or anything to put in it. My grandfather and grandmother Harvey had 10 children. 2 of them were stillborn, but so there was 8 children in that family. You can imagine there was something going on all the time, and it wasn't always good. My dad used to tell a story how he'd wear a pair of shorts to school in the morning, come back, his brother would wear them that afternoon to go to church, to school in. So that's how poor they were back then. And they were known pretty well for a scrapping family. Somebody was whooping up on somebody most of the time. The story is my grandmother told, my aunt sassed her, and my grandmother knocked her off the porch. And they're all out there and saying, "You gonna let her get by with that? You gonna let her do that to you?" And she bristled up and jumped back up on the porch, and off she went again. My grandmother knocked her off again. So that's kind of a history there. And I guess with 5 daughters and 3 brothers, somebody's not going to be happy with somebody all the time. So that's how my dad grew up in that. He was an oil field worker. He started early in life working in the oil field. Oh my goodness, he was 18 years old when he started, and really, he had to be somewhat of the supporter of the entire family at this time, because the oil field was paid pretty well back then, and my grandfather didn't make much money preaching. He was lucky to have a church somewhere, much less get paid anything for preaching. In 1916, so it wasn't 18 after that, it'd be what, 34? And then there was a school just down the road from it where my dad went sometimes in grade school. There was a school there. And then when he got in upper grades, he went to Somerset High School. Somerset High School. He had a high school education. It was quite unusual back then. Not everybody back then had the privilege of getting a high school education. He married my mother. She was 15 when they got married. She had me when she was 16. So my mother and I grew up together. So that was interesting too, I'll tell you. My dad I remember when I was about, I guess, I'd say around 5 or 6 years old. I remember him working in the oil field. We lived in Dallas, Texas. That's when Pearl Harbor got attacked by the Japanese. First thing he did was go join up. When he was in the oil field, he learned to fly a plane. So he could fly when he joined the Air Force. A small Cessna probably. So he could fly. It was Army Air Force back then. And so that's why he became a lieutenant and was a fighter pilot, because he already knew how to fly. So he was in the South Pacific fighting the Japanese. Yeah, this was when he was when he first went in. He was fighting in the South Pacific, like I said, and he flew P-39s when he first went in. That's all they had to fight with. He said it was a successful mission just to go and come back, and the plane get you there and back, much less having to fight the Japanese in the meantime. Then he flew the 50s, 51s, and towards the end of the war, he flew P-38s, the twin motor plane. And he said that was his favorite plane, was the P-38s. He crash landed 3 times. Once was close to the runway over there, and I think it was in the South Pacific. I'm trying to think of the name of the island that they were on. I think it was Rabaul or somewhere like that. Anyway, it was close to the airstrip, so that wasn't too bad. The next one was further, and the third one he hit the water. And he was telling my son about it, and he says, yeah, that time I crashed in the water. He says, that's a bad feeling. Like the other 2 weren't, but this was a bad feeling. He accompanied the flight that shot down Yamamoto. He didn't actually shoot him down, but he was flying cover over those that went down to shoot the plane down that Yamamoto was on. But he loves to tell that story. He said they had gotten word through the Navy that Yamamoto was coming to that island to land, to the Japanese island. I don't remember what island it was. And they were going to try to intercept them and take care, because they knew that if they could shoot down Yamamoto, that would really set the Japanese Navy back. And that was their goal to do, and they were successful in doing it. Well, one time he was, they were in their bunks close to the runway, and the Japanese were bombing them. So they had to hit the rush and get out of there and try to find a foxhole. Well, he said it was pitch dark, and he couldn't see where he was going. He was crawling along on the ground. He didn't have a flashlight or anything. He was trying to find his way to where the foxhole was, and he bumped heads with somebody. He didn't know if it was a Japanese, American, or who. He said, but praise the Lord, that guy went one way and I went the other. But that was one of the stories he told when he was over there in the South Pacific. And he said a lot of times back then, in a dogfight, there'd be a Japanese plane here and one American's down trying to shoot them down, and you're up there trying to shoot down too, and it'd be easy to shoot your own plane down sometime. He said it was quite a circus up there in the air. He did tell me one time he found a barge of Japanese full of Japanese, and he sunk that barge, and so he knows he was accounted for 3 kills. He shot down 3 Japanese airplanes, so he did get credit for that, and thank goodness he got back all right. My dad was quite a character. Somebody asked him, says, well, what's your name? He says, Harvey, and be sure and don't get it backwards. Somebody said, Harvey, how in the world did you get the name Harvey? He said, my mother stuttered. That pretty well sums up how who he was. He was quite a character. And he had a line about everything, I'll tell you. A few of the stories, we were going to go dove hunting one time, and so he went into this store in Beeville. He was living north of Beeville at the time, out in the country. Went in the store and bought some camouflage clothes to go hunting in. He went up to the cash register and says, can you see me? She looked at him and said, well, naturally I can see. He said, well, I don't want them, they don't work. One day, as he got older, I used to go out to his place in the country. He lived out there by Farm to Market Road on the way to Beeville, and as I came out of his house, I noticed there were skid marks on the highway all to the left. You could see where they went off in the bar ditch. More skid marks on the other side. I said, Lord, my goodness, Dad, somebody nearly had a bad accident. He said, yeah. Says, I don't know how they missed me, but they did. He was something. And I'd go to town looking for him, and he wouldn't be at home, so I knew he was in Beeville somewhere. I'd go just about any store there, and I say, have you seen Harvey today? And they said, no, but he was here just a little while ago. Everybody knew him. He did have the gift of hospitality. He wanted to feed everybody that he met. And he wanted to pay every time we'd go out. He wouldn't let me pay for a meal. Anytime he would take somebody to eat, he'd pay for the lunch. He'd get mad if you didn't let him. That's just who he was. He had the gift of hospitality. He raised the garden all the time. He left the garden and grew vegetables and everything. And he was quite a man, and I thank God for him. Well, he died there in that nursing home in Corpus Christi, but I took him from Beeville, his home, to that nursing home in Corpus Christi. And I want to take the time to thank the Lord that my parents were both believers. I grew up in a Christian home. I knew Jesus as far back as I can remember. And I knew him, and I knew he loved me. And I was fortunate enough to have that two parents that loved Jesus. I went to the first grade in Somerset, but that's the only grade I went there. I don't even remember my teacher's name or much about it, but I remember the school fight song. Somerset will shine tonight, Somerset will shine. Somerset will shine tonight, Somerset will shine. When the sun goes down, the moon comes up, Somerset will shine. I don't know why I even remember that, but I did. Out there on the Briggs place, it was south of Somerset, due south about 3 miles. My mother and I were staying there during World War II while my dad was overseas. And I remember the road to get up to where I was staying. My aunt, she had about 5 kids. Her husband my uncle was in the army fighting the Germans. My dad was fighting Japanese during World War II. So Mom and I went and lived with them while my dad was overseas at the Briggs place. With all of us out there, I'll tell you, I enjoyed a lot of it. But that many young'uns in one place, there's always some conflict. We used to play what we call Annie Over. I don't know if you ever remember that game or not. And we choose up sides, and one side on one side, one on the other. The most fun thing about playing was playing with my aunt, Because even if you didn't have the ball, if you ran at her like you had the ball and you were going to tag her with it, she'd just squat and just urinate all over herself. She'd get excited. She could. That was the most fun thing about playing Annie over. Okay. Ethel White, that was her name. She had all those children. She had 5 herself, yeah. And we had a good time out there, though. Somerset, Texas. I never will forget it. Oh my goodness, whatever we could get during World War II. I never went hungry, praise the Lord, but we didn't always have what we wanted. I remember sleeping in the big living room there by the fireplace so we'd stay warm. And these, what we call auto bugs, their eyes would shine at night, and we'd see them crawling on the floor. We'd mess with them at night till we went to sleep. It was quite an experience. Back then they had these oil field lines, call them shackle lines, go from one pump jack to another. The lines would go back and forth, and we'd try to ride those, see how long we could stay on them before we fell off. So it was an interesting life out there. We had a milk cow, and my oldest cousin had to milk the cow. He was pretty ornery. If he caught my younger cousin and myself, and his name was Jerry, if he caught either one of us by ourselves, he'd whip up on us. But if we stayed together, we could handle him, both of us. And I remember us digging a hole and covering it up with paper and sticks and put sand over it. And he was coming back, well, he stepped in it. Down he went, and there went the milk. Well, that wasn't good. We got a whipping for doing that. It ain't Ethel. My aunt, she was good. My mother was pretty good at discipline too. You know the old story about, boy, just wait till your daddy gets home? That wasn't my mother's philosophy. She was not going to be deprived of admitting discipline. She's going to take care of it herself. And I'm glad she did. I needed it. We'd have Harvey reunions sometimes. And I remember the old Briggs place. Did you ever hear Toodle-Eye parties? Kind of like a square dance. I do remember that about the Harvey family. They'd all meet in the old Briggs place, especially around Christmas. And they'd barbecue something, and it'd be a big thing. They'd sing songs about what they were doing, and it was like a square dance. Usually my uncle, he would start it, and then everybody would join it, and they'd sing it. And they'd sing that as they promenade and went back and forth in there. The reason they did that, I think, they loved. Baptists weren't supposed to dance, but you could toodle-eye, you see. Oh, that was their excuse to be able to do that. Oh. So we'd have a toodle-eye party out there at the old Riggs place, and instead of just a caller like for square dancing, no, everybody sang the song. Everybody knew them. And we'd all sing it together as they did it. I don't know where they came up with that name, but it was interesting. It was fun. I was so young that most time wouldn't let me toodle-eye. But the few times I got to, it was fun. Right, that's out in the country a little bit. And myself and my mother, we'd all go to Old Rock. My Ethel's Brood, well, it's just an old brick church. One room, maybe one room off of it. Later on they built onto it, but it's just one sanctuary. 2 outhouses, one women, one men's. Back then, being a kid, I couldn't wait till it was over with. You know, I wasn't fond of listening to a sermon. And there's other things I wanted to be doing outside. So I didn't mind the music. I liked the music. I liked the singing part. And the pianist, I don't remember whether it sounded very good or not, but everybody sang to it. So my grandfather, he was a pastor there for a while. Ray Harvey, But Ray Harvey wasn't the pastor when I was a kid there. It was somebody else. And then the cemetery out there, pretty typical. You know, they'd have a meet in the church house and have a message, and a eulogy, and then go out and have a hold up and bury them out there. But back then, though, usually there were some men that would do it with pick and shovel. But I don't remember who they were. But then there's still, most of the graves were marked off with concrete, maybe up an inch or two. And like all the Harveys were in one place, and a lot of the Smoots are buried out. June's, a lot of my kinfolks are buried in that graveyard. I remember my grandfather's funeral. He's buried there. My uncle Gilbert Harvey, my grandmother Lucy Harvey. I got two aunts, Alice Harvey and Virgie Harvey, buried there. So a lot of them are buried there. So there's a lot of graves out there. I know who they are. My dad used to claim there was a headstone out there called "Here Lies Larry MacDuff. He had 5 aces when 4 was enough." That wasn't so. To South San Antonio. There till I was about in the 5th grade. My dad was, like I said, was an oil-field worker, so he had to. He got a good job overseas in Venezuela. So I had to go to school somewhere, and the schools over there were not good. They had schools that were run by the English, but they weren't much good. From the 6th grade on, when my dad went overseas in the oil field, that's when I started at Peacock Military Academy. So that's where I went to school and graduated from Peacock Military Academy. San Antonio, my goodness. First year was terrible. I couldn't wait to get out of there. After the first year, it became my family, because my folks were gone. They were in Venezuela. I'd go over there for maybe a month during the summertime. I liked being over there, because I mean, it was jungle. It was quite an interesting place. And of course, they had the club for the employees of like Gulf Oil, tennis courts, swimming pools, a fun type place for kids. Hunting and fishing was great. I grew up, I was over there until I was about 19 years old. And I actually worked over there for maybe about 6 months myself. But in between, I went over there between semesters in college to earn some money. Ended up staying 6 months, and then came back and finished going back to school. Spent a couple of years in college and SAC, San Antonio Junior College in San Antonio. Then I goofed around, and then I went into the Navy, spent my boot camp in San Diego, California, and then went to school for 2 years studying nuclear weapons. And then I went aboard the USS Enterprise, which was the first nuclear carrier. And I was on the commissioning crew of it there in Norfolk, Virginia. And they give you an aptitude test to see what you're qualified to do and not do. And I fit the qualifications to become a nuclear weaponsman. So it was extensive training for the first 2 years. I thought the Navy is a bird nest on the ground. I mean, I went to school for 2 years. I thought, man, this will get it. Then the real Navy took over when I graduated from school. So, then spent my last almost 2 years in nuclear weapons on that ship, on USS Enterprise. I was on the ship when that Cuban crisis happened, when Khrushchev and Kennedy were battling over getting those missiles out of Cuba. We toured up and down the coast of Cuba for 60 days at combat readiness. I was ready for somebody to shoot at somebody. I was sick of being in combat readiness for 2 whole months. Finally, they got that rectified, and we went back to normal life aboard ship. So, interesting time that was. We didn't know what was going to happen, you know. We was there to blockade Cuba to keep them from coming and doing whatever they wanted to do, the Russians, that is. And it was an interesting time, I'll tell you. Not knowing what was going to happen, and once in a while the captain would come on and tell us what was going on, the fact that we were still in the process of blocking any ships from coming in, Russian ships. So they started that way. But when they knew that we were there and Kennedy and Khrushchev got their acts together, then they turned around and went back to Russia. I was on Guantanamo Bay, you know, R&R song. That was interesting. Guantanamo Bay was where Gitmo is, right across the bay from Cuba. Well, just a base. Wasn't much there, just a bar and a bunch of drunk sailors, and that's about it. That's about all there was to see there. It wasn't a fun tour. I wasn't crazy about the Navy, but I got some good experience and got to see some things I wouldn't have seen otherwise. I do remember some of the frustrations about being in the Navy. We'd pull into a real great port like Barcelona, Spain, or Cannes, France, or Naples, Italy, and I'd want to go ashore, and they'd have about half of the heads with women written on them for all the tourists coming aboard. When I finally found a shower I could clean up and go aboard, then half the livery boats were used for civilian. Kind of aggravating, but enjoyed a lot of the places I saw. I wished I could see them over now at the age I am. I'd learned a lot more, but all I was interested in is just getting off that ship. And it was an interesting part of my life. I was glad I got out as an E5, petty officer, second class. They wanted me to re-up, but I said no way to, you know, continue my military service. But I was ready to get out of the Navy. I got out about 3 months early to go back to college and get my degree, which was a good thing. Especially going back to school and get on with my life, you know, that was what was important to me at that time. I got a lot of good education for us. Nuclear weapons goes. I haven't made too many nuclear weapons since I've been out, so it didn't do me a lot of good. But it did teach me how to learn, and that was important. It helped me when I learned my other subjects during college. I graduated from St. Mary's University in San Antonio, physical education and history, and went to work for a pharmaceutical company, Burroughs Wellcome. Stayed with them for 27 years. Got married. Stayed married 27 years. No, I've had 3 sons and 1 daughter. Austin, he had his own drilling company, drilled foundation holes for contractors, for building sites and what have you. He lives in Dripping Springs. Brett, he lives in Cottonwood Shores now, which is just up the road towards the other side of Marble Falls. He worked for the city. He just now quit working for the city, and he's going to start to work for a restaurant and the man that owned the restaurant doing all their odd jobs and what have you. He's 60 years old, so he's about ready to quit too. Sonia, and then my daughter lives in Midlothian, up by Dallas. She has her own company. She services refineries, keeps her equipment going, and they contract her to take care of that stuff. And Justin has since passed away. My youngest son, I lost him. He was in Seattle, Washington. When I started with Burroughs Wellcome, I just graduated from St. Mary's. I had to go to work somewhere. By that time, I had 3 children and had to feed them. So I was glad to get the job. It's interesting to me, when I first started, I couldn't hardly spell aspirin, much less acetylsalicylic acid. But I had to learn how to do all that. Not only learn my products, but all my competitors' products, why they worked and how they worked. So I learned quite a bit. I remember the first doctor I called on by myself. It was interesting. I was sitting in the doctor's office waiting for him to come in so I could talk to him. And he had one of these apparatuses on his desk that's got all these bars on these metal balls, swinging. They go back and forth. You've seen them, I'm sure. Well, I got to messing with them. They all fell off. They're all over the floor there. And I'm in a rush trying to get all these things back together and get them back on his desk before he came in there. Well, luckily I did. I made it. We had a product named ActiFed. And I was working out in West Texas at that time for the company. And one of our selling points of ActiFed was that the astronauts used it on their flights in space. So I was talking to this doctor. I said, he was an old country doctor. I said, doctor, just think about this. I said, the product is so good that the astronauts took it to the moon. He said, well, Fred, that's good, but I don't treat many astronauts out here. When I first moved out to West Texas, I called on this country doctor out around Level Land. The next time I came back to see him, he said, well, Fred, how you like West Texas? I said, doctor, I'm not crazy about the country, but I sure do like the people. They're sure nice. Well, Fred, when all you got's each other, you got to be nice. That was his philosophy. They kept us in a nice automobile because it represented the company. So they gave us nice cars to drive. Like when I first went with them, I had back then a great big old Impala. Remember how big the cars were back then? It was a nice car. Every 2 years we got a new one. And we had our pick of 4 or 5 cars. So we had a good program. They were good to us. Yeah, suit and tie, the whole 9 yards. Every now and then we'd have sales meeting, have to go to that and put on a show for them. But I'd have to present some product or some problem or something, how to sell certain products. The older I got, the more I had to do this, the more experience I got in selling, the more I had to be part in. I had to train new reps as they came online. Do that. Enjoyed it. Oh, I love hunting, fishing, golf. Loved it. Dove, deer, turkey, that sort of thing. Wasn't crazy about hunting hogs, but I'd shoot a hog if I saw him to just get rid of him. The last place I lived in the country out at Beeville, I killed 25 hogs that 1 year on my place. They're kind of, these feral hogs are kind of like some of my kinfolks. Their gestation period's only 3 months. So it's hard to keep up with. I had a hunting lease for 17 years with a friend of mine. When I retired, he and I went together and put on sporting clay shoots. That's shotgun shoots at different people's ranches. We go to ranches and different places, put on shotgun shoots for all these people. That was a lot of fun. Usually Baptist, Southern Baptist churches. Wasn't too crazy about some of their philosophy, but their doctrine was sound. That's usually why I went. Some of them were pretty legalistic to a fault, but I tolerated them because I couldn't find anything else better. I became non-denominational for a while. I'm pretty much now non-denominational. I think denominations are man-made anyway, and the Bible's the one I look to now. I'm involved in prison ministry. I go here to the prison and share the gospel with these women in prison. Yeah, I'm an ordained minister. We had a place out in the country north of Beeville. After I retired, I did a lot of substitute teaching in high schools there in Corpus Christi. Worst job I ever had in my life. Trying to teach kids, you can't get their attention, you know. They're kind of like a mule. You know, it takes a two before to get their attention. While you're sending one kid to the principal, 5 more are killing each over there. I did it for 3 years, and I finally told him one day about noon. I got up and got my satchel and went to the office and said, "You don't know it, but you're short-handed. I'm gone. There's not enough money in Corpus Christi to have me to continue to put up with this." Worst job I ever had in my life. Then we moved out in the country and stayed out there for about 4 or 5 years. Went to a little old country church out there and taught the Bible while I was there. Friendship Baptist Church. It's still there. Still working. Had an interesting life. God's been good to me. Just be what God wants me to be. There is absolute truth, and that comes from the Word of God.